Imagine you are standing in an ancient Roman field hospital, somewhere in the hills of what is now northern France, around 55 BC. The legions have been fighting. There are men with deep lacerations, infected wounds, fevers climbing toward fatal. The field physician has no penicillin, no antiseptic spray, no ibuprofen. What he does have is a leather satchel packed with dried plants that he and every trained healer in the ancient world considered absolutely essential. Plants he gathered from roadsides, hedgerows, and disturbed ground along the march route. Some of those exact same plants are right now growing in your garden, your lawn, the crack in your driveway, the patch of weedy ground behind your garage. And there is a very good chance that every time you have seen them, you have either ignored them or destroyed them. Today that changes. We are going to walk through 11 plants that most of the modern world has classified as nuisances, but that have continuous documented medicinal use stretching back thousands of years across multiple independent civilizations. We are not talking about jungle rarities or expensive supplements. We are talking about plants so common and so adaptable that they literally follow human beings around the planet. And the deeper you look into the science, the more extraordinary the picture becomes. Stay with me especially for number 4, because what researchers discovered about one of its compounds genuinely surprised the scientists who found it. And number 1 has been the subject of continuous biomedical investigation for over 4 decades across multiple disease categories simultaneously. That is not a folk tale. That is a research record. Let us start at number 11 and work our way to the most remarkable plant on the list. Number 11. Stinging nettle. Here is a plant that announces its presence with pain. The leaves and stems are covered in microscopic hollow needles, each one a precision delivery system loaded with formic acid, histamine, and serotonin. Brush against it bare-skinned, and you will know about it for hours. That defense mechanism is so effective that the plant has essentially never needed to evolve away from it. It works. But here is the thing that botanists and ethnobotanists find genuinely fascinating. That same plant, consumed rather than touched, has one of the longest unbroken medicinal records in the Northern Hemisphere. Nettle never stopped being medicine in Europe between ancient times and the present day. There was no dark age for nettle use, no period where people forgot about it. It has been in continuous documented use as food, fiber, and medicine for thousands of years. The root extract has been studied in controlled clinical trials for benign prostatic hyperplasia, which is the gradual enlargement of the prostate that affects a significant proportion of men as they age. The symptoms are miserable: weakened flow, incomplete emptying, disruptive nighttime trips to the bathroom. Multiple randomized trials found that nettle root extract produced measurable, clinically meaningful improvements in those exact symptoms. Pharmaceutical companies charge significant money for drugs that accomplish something similar. The leaves work through completely different chemistry. They are dense with quercetin and other flavonoids documented for their ability to reduce inflammatory signaling. Freeze-dried nettle leaf has been investigated for seasonal allergies, and results showed meaningful histamine reduction in a substantial number of participants. The irony that a plant which injects histamine on skin contact appears to reduce the body's histamine response when consumed internally is one of those botanical paradoxes that never gets old. Nutritionally, fresh nettle leaf compares favorably to red meat for iron content, outperforms most dairy products for calcium by weight, and delivers a full amino acid profile unusual for any plant. Blanch the leaves for 30 seconds in boiling water, and the sting is completely gone. From there, cook it exactly like spinach. Number 10. Common plantain. Not the cooking banana. The flat, unassuming plant with broad-ribbed leaves that pushes through every sidewalk crack, every gravel path, every compacted lawn on the planet. Common plantain may be the most geographically widespread medicinal plant in human history. It has been used for wound care, infection, and inflammation on every inhabited continent where it grows. And it grows almost everywhere human beings have walked for any length of time. When European colonizers arrived in North America, plantain arrived with them, spreading so reliably along their routes that several indigenous nations independently developed the same name for it: white man's footprint. But here is the part of that story that usually gets left out. Those same nations quickly incorporated plantain into their own medicine, not out of curiosity about European customs, but because the plant demonstrably worked and they could see that it worked. The active compounds are aucubin and actiacide, both of which have measurable effects on inflammatory signaling, minor bleeding, and bacterial inhibition. These are not theoretical mechanisms. They have been documented in laboratory research. What makes plantain remarkable in practice is speed. Crush a fresh leaf and press it onto an insect sting or a superficial cut, and something noticeably happens within minutes. The swelling begins to ease. The burning softens. That speed catches people who have never used it completely off guard. A clinical trial published in 2015 found that plantain-based ointment outperformed standard pharmaceutical care on second-degree burns in the study population. That is an extraordinary result for a botanical preparation, and one that should probably be more widely discussed than it is. Number 9. Yarrow. Here is a plant with a mythological origin story that turns out to be completely consistent with the documented historical record. Ancient Greek tradition held that Achilles used yarrow to treat battlefield wounds during the Trojan War. Whether that specific story is history or embellishment almost does not matter, because the practical reality is documented independently across dozens of cultures over at least 2,000 years. Soldiers carried dried yarrows specifically to pack into open wounds. That was not tradition for tradition's sake. That was field medicine with observable results. Yarrow contains a group of compounds called achillean, named for that legendary connection, and laboratory research has confirmed that achillean genuinely accelerates platelet aggregation, which is the biological mechanism that initiates clot formation. The bleeding slows. This is real biochemistry, not folk belief. What separates yarrow from most other wound plants is that it manages to promote clotting and tissue repair simultaneously. Most plants that do one are not particularly effective at the other. Yarrow does both, which is why it remained in military medical kits across multiple cultures and centuries. The same anti-inflammatory compounds that made yarrow valuable for wounds also appear in traditional use for fever, specifically as a tea consumed to help the body break a fever by promoting perspiration. Independent traditions across Europe, Asia, and among multiple Native American nations converged on the same use for the same plant. That level of cross-cultural agreement across populations that had no contact with each other is one of the strongest signals ethnobotanists recognize when evaluating whether a traditional use reflects genuine biological activity. Number 8. Dandelion. Let us talk about the most aggressively misunderstood plant in the history of suburban lawn care. Entire industries exist specifically to eliminate dandelion. Billions of dollars have been spent on herbicide products marketed around its eradication. And the plant being eradicated happens to be one of the most nutritionally complete, medically documented species in the temperate world, with a research profile that would make pharmaceutical companies envious if it could be patented. Every part of the dandelion is usable. Every part has documented properties. The root stimulates bile production and improves bile flow from the gallbladder. This matters more than most people realize, because bile is the primary transport mechanism through which the liver moves processed waste out of the body. Anything that improves bile flow directly supports the liver's core function. Traditional medicine understood this for centuries, and modern laboratory research has begun mapping exactly how it happens at the molecular level. The leaves function as a diuretic, one of the most studied plant-based diuretics available. Here is where dandelion does something that no pharmaceutical diuretic has managed to replicate. It replaces the potassium it causes the body to excrete, because dandelion leaves are extraordinarily potassium-rich. Every pharmaceutical diuretic depletes potassium, which is why doctors prescribe potassium supplements alongside them. The dandelion has built that correction into itself. Nutritionally, the leaves deliver more beta-carotene per serving than carrots, more calcium by weight than milk, and meaningful amounts of iron, vitamin K, and vitamin C. The plant that homeowners pay professionals to kill has been sustaining human health since before writing existed. Number 7. Purslane. This one is genuinely surprising even to people who follow nutrition research closely. Purslane is a low-growing succulent with thick reddish stems and small glossy leaves that sprawls across garden beds through summer. Most gardeners pull it without a second thought. Researchers studying it have had a very different reaction. Purslane contains the highest measured concentration of omega-3 fatty acids ever recorded in a land plant. Specifically alpha-linolenic acid, the same essential fat found in flaxseed and walnuts. Some studies found that purslane delivers comparable omega-3 content per gram to several species of commonly eaten fish. That single finding repositions this plant entirely. Omega-3 fatty acids are foundational to cardiovascular function, neurological health, and the regulation of chronic inflammation, which is now understood to be the underlying mechanism driving most of the chronic diseases that kill people in industrialized societies. The populations most severely deficient in omega-3s are exactly the populations eating the most processed, plant-sparse diets. And the solution has been growing uninvited in their garden beds the entire time. Purslane also contains significant melatonin, the compound that regulates circadian rhythm and sleep quality, at concentrations higher than most tested plant foods. It contains glutathione, which is the body's primary endogenous antioxidant. Traditional medicine in the Middle East, India, and China all independently reached similar conclusions about purslane's value for inflammation, digestive health, and general restorative qualities. That cross-cultural consensus, combined with the modern nutritional analysis, makes a compelling case. Eat it raw in salads. Sauté it lightly. The flavor is mild, slightly tangy, and genuinely pleasant. Number 6. Chickweed. Chickweed looks like it would blow away in a mild breeze. Thin stems, tiny leaves, small white flowers. It grows low, spreads quietly, and vanishes completely in dry heat. It is also one of the most consistent botanical remedies for skin inflammation in the traditional pharmacopoeias of multiple northern European cultures, and the chemistry underneath that reputation is well worth understanding. The leaves contain saponins and phytosterols that have documented anti-inflammatory and antipyretic effects. Antipyretic means they specifically reduce itching, not through numbing but by interrupting the inflammatory signaling cascade that causes the itch sensation to begin with. For eczema, psoriasis, hives, insect bites, and contact dermatitis, crushed fresh chickweed applied directly to the affected skin produces a cooling, calming response that generations of herbalists documented and that modern botanical research has begun to explain mechanically. The interesting comparison is with hydrocortisone cream, which is what most dermatologists recommend for these conditions. Hydrocortisone works by suppressing immune activity broadly in the treated area. That produces short-term relief, but causes measurable skin thinning with repeated use. Chickweed reduces local inflammatory activity without suppressing immune function systemically, which is a fundamentally different and, for long-term use, more favorable mechanism. It is also edible. Mild, fresh flavor. Added to salads or soups. The plant pulling double duty as food and medicine is a pattern you will see repeatedly on this list. Number 5. Self-heal. A plant that earned its common name across multiple unrelated cultures on multiple continents has almost certainly done something to deserve it. Self-heal, known botanically as Prunella vulgaris, appears in meadows, lawns, and garden margins across the entire northern hemisphere. Medieval European herbalists used it for wounds, mouth sores, and sore throats. Traditional Chinese medicine valued it for similar applications. Native American herbalists across several nations independently arrived at overlapping uses. When unconnected human civilizations keep reaching the same conclusions about the same plant, that is one of the most reliable signals in ethnobotany. Modern phytochemistry has found rosmarinic acid in self-heal at significant concentrations. Rosmarinic acid is one of the most extensively researched antioxidant compounds found in any common plant, with documented antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory, and antiviral properties. The antiviral research is where scientists have been particularly surprised. Laboratory studies have found that self-heal extracts demonstrate inhibitory effects against herpes simplex virus, influenza, and in some studies HIV, with the proposed mechanism being interference with how the virus bonds to and enters host cells. That research is ongoing and has not yet produced clinical treatments, but the scientific interest is serious and sustained, not fringe. Topically, self-heal visibly accelerates wound closure and has reduced mouth ulcer healing time in clinical studies. Brew the fresh or dried herb as a tea. Apply crushed fresh leaves directly to minor wounds. The plant is edible with a mildly bitter flavor that works in soups and salads. Number 4. Sheep sorrel. Here is the one inflammation researchers keep coming back to. Sheep sorrel grows in thin, acidic, poor soil, the margins of paths, disturbed ground, tired lawns. Its small arrow-shaped leaves have a sharp, sour, intensely lemony flavor from oxalic acid, making it one of the easiest wild plants to identify with a single taste. Traditional European and Asian medicine used it as a cooling remedy for fever, a digestive aid, and a mild diuretic. What brought sheep sorrel to the attention of oncology researchers is its role as one of 4 plants in the traditional formula known as Essiac, developed in the early 20th century by Canadian nurse Renée Kess, who based it on an Ojibwe herbal tradition. The formula was studied across several decades for potential effects on tumor activity. Laboratory research specifically on sheep sorrel extracts has found cytotoxic activity against certain cancer cell lines, meaning compounds in the plant appear to interfere with cancer cell proliferation under controlled laboratory conditions. That is not a clinical proof of anything, and no responsible person should interpret it as one. But it has generated enough serious scientific attention to sustain continued investigation. The plant is also rich in vitamin C and in flavonoids including hypericide and vitexin, both studied for cardiovascular protective and anti-inflammatory effects. As food, the leaves add a bright, tart dimension to salads and soups that is genuinely pleasant. A plant growing in your worst soil that cancer researchers have been studying for decades. Worth knowing. Number 3. Cleavers. If you have ever walked through overgrown vegetation and emerged covered in small sticky seeds clinging to every fabric surface, you have already met cleavers. The plant has evolved one of nature's most effective seed dispersal mechanisms by turning every passing animal and human into an unwitting courier. It is universally recognized and almost universally underestimated. Cleavers, known scientifically as Galium aparine, appears consistently across European herbal medicine, Ayurvedic practice, and several Native American traditions as a tonic for the lymphatic system. Understanding why that matters requires a brief explanation of what the lymphatic system actually does. The lymphatic system is a parallel circulatory network running alongside the blood vessels throughout your entire body. Unlike the cardiovascular system, it has no pump. Lymph moves through a combination of muscular movement, breathing, and the pressure differentials created by arterial pulsing nearby. Its job is critical. It carries immune cells to sites of infection, clears metabolic waste from tissues, and manages fluid balance throughout the body. When it becomes sluggish, which happens during prolonged inactivity, illness, or cold months of low movement, the symptoms are recognizable. Persistently swollen glands, puffiness in the extremities, slow recovery from illness, a general sense of heaviness and congestion. Cleavers acts as what traditional herbalists call a lymphagogue, a substance that stimulates lymphatic movement. The compounds responsible, including tannins, flavonoids, and iridine glycosides, have demonstrated diuretic and anti-inflammatory effects in research that supports the traditional application. Traditional herbalists specifically reached for cleavers in spring, when the plant is freshest and most abundant, as a cleansing tonic after the inactive winter months. That timing is not arbitrary. It is when the body has had the least movement and the greatest accumulation of stagnant metabolic waste. Cold-pressed juice from the fresh plant is the most potent preparation. Run the raw stems through a blender and strain. Tea from the dried herb also works, but with reduced efficacy. Number 2. Ground elder. Here is a plant with a history that completely reframes how you think about garden weeds. Ground elder is currently one of the most despised garden plants in Europe. It spreads through underground rhizomes, regenerates from fragments of root too small to see, and once established is essentially impossible to fully eliminate. Gardeners spend enormous effort trying to remove it. The reason it is so widespread in Old English and European walled gardens is that medieval monks put it there deliberately. Ground elder was cultivated across monastic gardens specifically for the treatment of gout, the agonizing inflammatory condition caused by uric acid crystal deposits forming in the joints, particularly the big toe and the ankles. Monks who ate relatively rich diets by the standards of their era were prone to gout. They grew ground elder not as an experiment, but as a practical solution, because it worked reliably enough to be worth cultivating and protecting. The plant contains chlorogenic acid, caffeic acid, and several flavonoids, with documented anti-inflammatory and diuretic effects. The diuretic action increases urinary excretion of uric acid, which is precisely the mechanism that modern pharmaceutical gout treatments also target, just through different chemical pathways. Medieval monks did not understand the biochemistry. They understood the outcome. Young spring leaves, harvested before the plant flowers, have a fresh, slightly herbal flavor similar to flat-leaf parsley, and can be used in salads, as a pot herb, or in soups. After flowering, bitterness increases significantly, and the culinary window closes. A plant that intelligent, medically literate people once planted deliberately became a nuisance only because it succeeded too well at surviving. And now, number 1, Creeping Charlie. This is the plant that, once you know what you are looking at, you will start seeing absolutely everywhere. Low-growing, small scalloped leaves that release a distinctive minty aroma when crushed, tiny purple flowers in spring. It spreads in dense mats across lawns, and is listed alongside dandelion in most lawn care guides as a primary broadleaf herbicide target. Millions of households apply chemical treatments every spring specifically to kill it. What those product labels do not mention is that Creeping Charlie has been the subject of continuous published biomedical research for over 4 decades, across multiple disease categories, and the scientific picture that research has assembled is remarkable. The primary bioactive compounds are rosmarinic acid, ursolic acid, and a group of flavonoids including luteolin and apigenin. Rosmarinic acid alone has accumulated a research record that spans anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, antioxidant, and neuroprotective applications. In Alzheimer's disease research specifically, rosmarinic acid has been studied for its potential to inhibit the formation of amyloid beta plaques, the protein deposits considered central to the disease's progression. The mechanism is credible enough that serious research institutions have maintained continuous investigation. That is a meaningful threshold in biomedical science. Luteolin has been studied for activity against multiple cancer cell lines, for its effects on neuroinflammation, and as a potential compound in allergy management through a mechanism called mast cell stabilization, which reduces the immune system's tendency toward excessive histamine release. Apigenin has attracted attention in anxiety and sleep research for its interaction with GABA receptors in the brain, the same receptor class targeted by pharmaceutical benzodiazepines, but through a gentler, non-dependency-forming mechanism. Traditional European herbal medicine used creeping Charlie for respiratory congestion, sinus complaints, ear problems, and as a bitter digestive tonic that stimulated bile and enzyme production. The 17th century English herbalist Nicholas Culpeper, whose work shaped European plant medicine for generations, described it as a general remedy suited to the whole body. Modern phytochemistry is now assembling the molecular explanation for why practitioners across centuries kept reaching that same conclusion. The leaves can be brewed fresh or dried as a tea. Young spring leaves work in salads and soups, mild and slightly bitter in a way that is functional rather than unpleasant. Now let us step back from the individual plants and look at the larger picture, because there is something important happening here that is worth sitting with. Every plant on this list shares a specific characteristic. It grows in disturbed, marginal, or heavily trafficked ground. These are not forest rarities that require specific conditions to survive. These are pioneer species, plants specifically adapted to thrive in the difficult, compacted, nutrient-depleted environments that human habitation creates. Roadsides, lawns, garden paths, cracked pavement. They follow us. They have been following us for thousands of years. There is a theory in ethnobotany that this pattern is not accidental. These plants evolved alongside human populations, or were spread by them, because the relationship was mutually beneficial. Humans disturb ground, creating exactly the open, mineral-rich soil these plants prefer. The plants, in return, provided food and medicine to those same humans. That relationship was understood intuitively across the ancient world even without the vocabulary of evolutionary biology to describe it. Our great-grandparents understood this instinctively. They knew which plants grew near the house, what they were good for, and when to harvest them. That knowledge was transmitted generation to generation as practical survival information. It did not disappear because it was disproved. It disappeared because it was replaced, first by industrialized food systems that made foraging seem unnecessary, then by pharmaceutical medicine that framed plant-based remedies as primitive, and finally by lawn care culture that rebranded the entire category of useful wild plants as aesthetic problems requiring chemical solutions. The science did not go away. Researchers in Europe, Asia, and North America have been publishing studies on these plants continuously. The knowledge exists in peer-reviewed literature, in ethnobotanical archives, in traditional medicine systems that never abandoned it. The gap is not between what is true and what is false. The gap is between what is known in research settings and what the average person believes when they reach for the herbicide. None of this means you should replace medical care with lawn weeds. It means that some of the plants growing within 50 feet of where you are sitting right now have a longer and better documented history of therapeutic use than most products on pharmacy shelves, and that knowing them costs nothing. The Roman field physician knew his plants because his patient's survival depended on that knowledge. We have the extraordinary luxury of modern medicine available when we need it. We also have the option of understanding the pharmacy that has been growing at our feet the entire time. That knowledge was never lost. It has just been waiting for you to look down. If this gave you a new way of seeing what grows around you, hit like and subscribe. Next time, we go even deeper into the plants that traditional cultures across the world protected above all others, and the modern research finally catching up to explain why. Drop in the comments what you want to explore next.